Okay, well, hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this podcast, to the second episode. Today, I was brave enough to ask my friend if they were willing to come in and answer some of my questions and have a recorded conversation. So today, I'm joined by Nick. Woo! Nick is down.
Hello.
And I met Nick at art school, and we immediately just had like interesting conversations, and you're a very interesting character to me. And as I get to know more of you, you inspire me, and you also, I think shock is not the right word, but you're not always what is expected when you look at you. So that's really interesting. I think you're a really interesting character, and I think you're very sweet, and I think you're very admirable. Um, yeah, and I value your friendship, and I value your time, and so I value whatever is going to happen in this moment. So thank you for being here. Do you feel like responding?
I guess. Thank you for the nice compliments. I feel already seen in this podcast, even though I've not really spoken yet. Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I am new at this as well. So, yeah, we will be like anxious twins trying to record this second episode of this. Probably, I imagine, can only be super wonderful podcast. So I'm very excited, and I'm very excited about what we're gonna talk about because I have no idea, and I really I'm curious what's gonna happen. So good luck.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's wild. I haven't done a lot of preparation, even though I do have certain topics that I just find interesting and that are worth exploring. And yesterday we had a bunch of wild conversations that went in all kinds of directions, but they always come back together, and the unifying concept is life. uh, so, yeah. Do you maybe want to elaborate on the concept of life, what life is to you? We're going big. We're going big, big, big. So, yeah, how do you relate to life? What do you see as life? There we go.
Wow, that's a very very big question. What do I see as life? I guess life to me is I feel like life is everything. Um, it's the little rocks that you kick on the street. It's sitting here with you now. But for me, life is mostly about all the things connecting together in like one big web of relationality, if that makes sense. So if you ask about the concept of life, to me, it's that it's like the sun shining and reflecting of all the surfaces so that it comes into your eye, even though it reflects all directions, only one of those reflections comes into your eye, and then you can see something, and I think that's beautiful, and I think that's how life works in general for everything. um yeah. Does it make sense? I hope it makes any sense. Do you have questions about that, maybe?
You were going in about reflections and all that comes into your eye. So, would then life be related to visibility? Or do you think life lives beyond what we can perceive with our own eyes?
Oh, life lives definitely beyond what we can perceive with our own eyes. It's not about seeing at all. I just, in my brain, use that as a metaphor because that's how I understand um, everything to be, and it's not about. In this situation, it would be like light reflecting, but for me, actually, it's about energy reflecting off of each other. Light is a form of energy, and I think because light is a visible form of energy, it makes it easier to understand when you explain something to people. But actually, I think it's not about visibility at all. It's about especially all the things and all the the energies that cannot perceive things with eyes, or for example, take a stone. I am a firm believer of a lot of, yeah, I think stones are very, very important, and I have a lot of love for stones. Because I feel like stones are very underappreciated because no one ever thinks of stones as being able to perceive anything, even though they literally perceive everything, right? Even though they don't feel in the same way we do, they really change with their environment like we do. So they grow in that sense the same way we do. Um, and that goes for anything and everything. It goes for your shoes, it goes for a little piece of metal you find on the street, it goes for a tree, it goes for mountains, it goes for stars. And I feel like the interconnectedness of all these things is what life is about. And it doesn't have to make sense, and it doesn't have to be about seeing it. We don't even have to be able to understand it for it to be there, right? I think, yeah, that's very important to realize that you are only this one thing that can perceive only so little, and all the other things are just as important as me and you sitting here. I feel like I'm preaching some choir.
I handed you the microphone to give your piece. So stand on the soapbox, say it as it is, and we go from there. Yeah. Okay. Big. Yeah. Something about the interconnectedness of all things, and I'm a firm believer of that too. And you were mentioning the stone situation, and I know you. So Nick actually did a whole project last semester, like in their third year, um, and it was about, and I still haven't read it, I'm so sorry, but I was very actively excited about this because when you were telling me this story, I'm a spiritual boo boo, so I was thinking about crystals, but I was thinking about a specific chapter that I read in a book called The Healing Wisdom of Africa by Malidoma Salome. There's a middle name, I always forget it. My apologies. And in this book, he takes us through the mythology or spiritual significance of his culture from the Dagara tribe in Burkina Faso. And they have a whole, there's a whole chapter on minerals and specifically how they then go into this really direct state of listening, and they sit there for hours. It's like a meditative experience, I would say. Um, and the mineral tells the person, or uh, I gives out information or transmutes information. I don't know. It's just a conversation that happens, and I thought that was so interesting and so wild, and created a whole new layer to rocks beyond crystals for me. And yeah, I wanted to say more about that. Um, yeah, I tried to practice that as well, and I thought it was just really interesting. And also, in a whole other experience that I had about, it was like a sweat hut ritual, and all the elements come together because you're sitting on the earth, and then you have fire, which heats up the space, but the fire is together with the rocks, so the rocks are like glowing. They're glowing, and then water is poured on top of it, and then you sort of sit in this steam bath together in the dark. It's beautiful. But every time the fireman brings a new layer of rocks, they say, "Hey, ancestors," and we all greet, "Hey, ancestors." So sort of this idea of that rocks are these ancient creatures that have been here so long because they don't breathe in the same way. Their lifespan is completely different to ours. And I think that's kind of what you try to explore as well, right? You're nodding. That's a yes. Would you like to talk more about your obsession with stones, your love for stones, everything that was birthed around that, all of that? I'm so intrigued.
Yeah, of course. I would love to talk about stones. I am very excited about my stone collection. They might look like normal stones to people, but for me they're all very special because I all collected them, and they have lived with me for over for a year, I think, for a year now, and yeah, we've become really good friends, and yeah, I actually did a whole research into the personality of stones. So, how does a stone react to its environment, and what different traits can you gather from this information in a very, yeah, in the same way you would a person. Um, so, that's what I've been doing, and also I've been um, trying to figure out how the life of a stone works and what its purpose is in its life, instead of what its purpose could be in our life. So yeah, that's what I've been doing a lot, and I think I used stones for this because stones and rocks are actually one of those things that you don't notice as a yeah as an agency on its own, because I feel like many situations where we find rocks and stones, it's in our houses, it's in the pavement, um, it's as a tool, right? It's not as its own um, agency anymore, where it has its own life. They're like working. One of my favorite artists, Jimmy Durham, he thought of this concept of like stones that are unemployed. So the stones that you find in the street that you kick or that are under a tree and you don't really notice. All these stones that are living in the wild, that are not part of human structure or our use, that these stones are like unemployed stones that are free to roam everywhere they want to, and that concept really made me happy and really yeah, made me see stones in a different way. So a lot of the time when I talk about this, a lot of people immediately go to crystals or minerals and the meaning of those specific kinds of stones spiritual in a spiritual connotation, or yeah, just because they think they're pretty, and that's why I wanted to focus my research on the stones that do not have that, because I feel they're even less seen. And something that comes with this is that I think that a stone is actually the opposite of a person, because everything that we see as being very human is something that the stone does not really do. They have no emotional expressions, they don't have a face, they don't have eyes, they don't have social feelings in the way that we do. So I feel like stones is actually the best way to also learn how to care for entities that are not necessarily easy to care for or convenient to care for. So I think that's why stones are also very big in my heart, because I feel like they're outsiders in our uh, culture or society, and I also feel like an outsider a lot of the time. So I want to be able to learn how to care for them, so I can learn how to care for myself and for all the other outsiders and things that are not necessarily always looked after as much as I hope they would. I think that's an answer to your question. I can show you my favorite stone, Steve, if you want.
Yeah, show us
Okay,
Steve.
wait.
Show the Steve. This is only if you're watching the video, which is low quality, but we're still making a video.
It can still make noise. Look.
Let's explore all the qualities of Steve.
Yes, Steve is awesome because Steve actually fits in your hand very nicely. So it's a pet stone, and that means it's an introverted stone because if it was an extroverted stone, it's about the energy it would give off to me, right? If it were an extroverted stone, I would be, it would give me more energy when I'm holding it. And because it actually fits in my hand really nicely, so it's not giving me a lot of energy when I'm holding it, therefore it's a introverted stone like me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's Steve, and Steve is really cute.
So, how do you, can you try to explain how you would observe the energy that this stone gives off? Can you try?
Of course. So, um, yeah, where do I start? So, you can actually do a lot of things with stones that normal people wouldn't do. You can lick them, you can look at their surface, you can see if it fits in your arms or in your hand. So that's mostly the things that are really present to me, right? Also, its size. If it's a very big stone, it means it's younger, right? Because stones mostly tend to break down. Um, and if it's a big stone, your relation to it's also very different, because then it's very heavy to pick it up, and it's you cannot break it. That means that the stone is more imposing on you, right? Because it's more, there's more danger to the interaction for you as a person, and that's one of the things that is important. But also, the surface also always gives me a lot of energy, because if you have a very reflecting surface, or like when you lick the stone, and you can see if like your saliva sits on top of the stone, or if the stone absorbs it. So that's also a lot of like clues that you can use to find, or that I use to find the energy of a stone, rather than having no clue and sitting with it for a long time, which also will probably work. So yeah, do it at home. See if your stone is introverted or extroverted. It's a lot of fun. I would recommend it to everyone to talk to some stones sometime.
Ah, there's so much. There's so much. It's like you kind of explore its character by engaging in it in ways that you are familiar with. So you're using your the tools at your hand, basically your eyes, your ears, your skin, your weight, your organism, your saliva, all of those things that you produce or that you already inherently contain, and you relate it to this other thing, and therefore you find its character because it's in relationship to you, which comes back to the relationship of life or the relativity. I'm curious, how do you care for stones? Where does it start? Because you were saying something about how um, it might be difficult or inconvenient. I have the complete opposite experience of that because it's something that's so inherently comfortable with itself. That's how I experience stones myself, because they're just there. They don't do a lot of things. They're not very like they're not physically active, if that makes sense, in the way that I'm familiar with what physical activity is. Also, the concept of unemployed stones. So interesting because the stone is put into a brick house, for instance. It's laid on top of each other, so they're very close and they're dense, and they've been carefully manufactured or structured in a certain type of way so they can be used, employed. But an unemployed stone is just there. It's just existing. It's almost like the full on Buddha state of all times. And therefore, it would actually be, in my perception, really easy to take care of a stone because it just exists as it is. So, why did you say, why were you, why did you say it might be inconvenient or uncomfortable or whatever like that? Yeah, go for it.
So I understand what you're saying, and I think I might have not used the right words as well. But what you're like, because it's easy to care for the stone, right? Because it doesn't need me to feed it every day, and it doesn't need me to to like water it or anything like that. So it's very easy to care for a stone. But I think the inconvenience in it is that it's something that you first have to think about, or it doesn't necessarily. It's not a habit of some sort. When you are living in this Western society here where we are living, to care for these stones or to care about them. I think maybe care about is a better word actually, because yeah, I feel like they when yeah, I feel like they get overlooked a lot because there are so many of them, and people, yeah, I think I think you have to have the first step of acknowledging that stones and or whatever object there is, that also has a very important presence before you can actually care about them. So I think that's where the difficulty lies. And I think if you are aware of that, then your whole world will open up. I really believe that it will make your life better to care about all these little things. Yeah.
I see where you're going. And I understand what you're saying because it's what we're really doing here and what I find as I continue talking to you. That's just my laptop existing, by the way. um, is sort of the addressing the animacy of life or the animacy of things, the value of everything we have around us, and um, because we I think we kind of get raised in a way that really disconnects us from a lot of things. It's a long uh, thing to try to explain, but I think a lot of people can understand what I'm trying to get at as I'm talking about this. Um, and so our relationship to our world around us becomes sort of this experience of alienation and disconnection. And the more we sort of wake up to this concept of everything has value and everything has a spirit and everything exists for a reason, and you then try to become a decent human being in that experience, and you're sort of understanding that you're part of the ecosystem, not above it or below it or outside of it. You're in it, you're in the middle of it, you're in the cycle. um, and your duty, I believe our duty is to really live in that reciprocity and live in that respect, and to be just one of those things, not above it, not outside of it, like I said, but one of those things. And what would you want to receive in your life if you are addressed as a human, like as a valuable entity in the cosmos and the whole entire experience? You would want respect. You want people to handle you with care. You would want people to acknowledge you. And yeah, this is what I love about you, because you relate it to everything around you, even to objects that I might not even become very aware of. So that's really nice. Yeah, and I also think that in that way, it reflects how we care for ourselves, right? If you don't acknowledge this or you don't acknowledge that or whatever, and you're sort of just absorbed by one or two concepts of your life, then that becomes your whole awareness. As if you become aware of all these different things, you become more aware of yourself, maybe as well, right? Um, yeah. So, is there, in this reality of everything has value for you, does it inspire you to, in the way you care for yourself? As in, like, yeah, basically that. I think the question is quite clear. So, go for it.
Yeah, I do think so. Especially, it it not only helps me to care for myself. It mostly helps me to care for my body, because I've quite a difficult relationship with my body. Always have had it, especially as like a trans person. My body is not something I want to be me. Actually, even though it is. So I feel like using my body as this, like you said, as a vessel for receiving all these beautiful connections I have with all these things around me. It really helps me also to accept my body and let it also be part of me, even though I not always agree with it, right? But I can it gives me also a way of using that as something that I can use to my advantage, to have this body that I don't always feel home in, to have this like this extra step of reflection on the way I can see everything and on the way I can experience everything. So I think it's mostly helping me with that a lot. If yeah.
Uh, beautiful. Thank you for sharing first and foremost, because it's becoming a bit more personal as we're diving in deeper. Um, yeah. So as you learn to address the animacy and the value of everything around you, it teaches you about how to value yourself, and even though you might not always like it, um, you still honor it, right? Yeah, it's beautiful. I realized that as we were starting this podcast, I did an introduction, but would you be interested in introducing yourself a little bit, elaborating on who you are, or at this time, because we're always allowed to change, but who you are right now?
Yeah, of course I can do that. I don't know. Hi, I'm Nick. That's whatever.
Hello, Nick.
Hello. No, I'm Nick. I am an art student. I love animals. This feels like such a primary school introduction, but I don't care. No, I'm Nick. I and my pronouns are he, they. Um, I have I do a lot of taxidermy. um, I listen to emo music and metal and other things. Um, and sometimes I like operas. Yes, I don't know. I am not very good at introducing myself because I feel like, it, yeah, I always start stuttering whenever I try to. But thank you for this opportunity. Did you introduce yourself yet on the podcast?
The last episode was like some type of introduction where I was explaining how I haven't promoted this at all. So, anyway, it was about sort of why I started this podcast and where my spiritual journey starts, and a little bit honing in on plant medicine because it's so prominent in my path right now. Um, but I, for instance, probably didn't even, I don't remember talking about the fact that I went to art school or that I studied psychology or that I'm a graduated tailor or anything like that, or even my cultural heritage. So all of that is still to be explored. Um, yeah, and I get it. It's like, hi, my name is Miriam. I am 24 years old. But it is sort of once we step over that hurdle, I think this also is interesting to explore. We step over that hurdle of, oh, I'm talking about myself, and you actually experience to just be comfortable in that space. A lot of things become revealed, and you could sit for 7 hours and you'd still not be done talking. Um, and that has been a recent development of mine to continue that. But yeah, I'm very new at this. And I feel like the first season is just trying the format and seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, getting more comfortable in the routine. It's like dancing for the first time. I mean, you have all these different dance moves, but you're like, how am I going to structure this, right? So we're just dancing, we're just trying. Um, yeah. So I did and I didn't. There's so much more to explore on a person. You want to say something?
Yes, I have maybe a good question how you can introduce yourself today. Because this question my friends ask a lot, and I think it's a very good question. But what fruit do you feel like you are today?
I've had this question before about vegetables, and I found it really difficult. But a fruit. I have to think of. I remember what I chose eventually, and I'm just gonna say it now as well. I feel like a yam, but it's interconnected on so many levels because my name is Mariam, but my one of my names I want to go by or I'm going by is Jams. Um, Something about sweet potatoes and about music and all of that coming together in like a sweet potato, a yam, and it's also a delicacy in like specifically Egyptian cuisine. So, uh, yeah, I'm a yam. I don't like this question actually, if I'm being really honest. But I'm still gonna ask you because that's reciprocity. What fruit do you feel like today?
I'm sorry for asking you this question. What fruit? Oh shit! Now I asked the question and I didn't even think of an answer for myself.
It's not a fun
No,
question.
it is actually not. I'm sorry. I think it would be like a framboos, framberry.
Cranberry.
Yes,
It's what's it called?
it's because we watched
Raspberry.
raspberry. Yes, it's because we watched Amelie yesterday. So now I feel like I'm still in that atmosphere. So that's why I feel like a raspberry. Yes, we will get there. We will get there. Um. So then, okay. So I am interested in like the difference between different days and who you are. So that would be my question to you. Like, how do you feel that you change from day to day, or how does you as a person or as a personality like change from day to day?
I love how we went from cranberries to changing personalities. I'm very proud of the word cranberry, actually. We should keep that going. And I love how the tables have turned. Changing every day. Yeah. I think. That is interesting. That is worth thinking about because there is somewhere in my system a default into um, basically chasing back to who I was the day before because change is something inherently inevitable but also something that terrifies us at the same time. And so we sort of but also I then don't allow myself to change maybe on certain days because I'm like not willing to step into the unfamiliar. But it's true, every moment changes us. Every experience in our life changes us. Every word that we've said is then said and is brought into space and then it's gone again at the same time. And so we don't have, as I said before, you're allowed to change at any moment. So I think that's a practice, maybe even, to just wake up and to say, okay, the day comes as it comes, and to just observe our impulses and ask ourselves, okay, is this the impulse I still want to entertain or not? And in that way, we can slowly, gradually, maybe let go of certain patterns that don't work for us anymore. But it has to do with allowing ourselves to change in each and every moment. And that, I think, is so abstract to how we structure life these days. Because if I allow myself to change every moment, the job I loved last week could be not in alignment with the person I am this day, but I signed a contract and I want to live in this city, but maybe next week I don't want to live in this city anymore because I'm changing all the time, but I signed a contract for that. And so it becomes a really nomadic experience and something that is very static in, like, as I'm saying, our society is very static and our being in essence is maybe way more nomadic if we allow ourselves to change and allow every moment to shape us. And then we remold ourselves all the time, and then the whole concept of self-identity sort of shifts to just being in the moment. And you're no longer the observer, you just are? Ah, what a good question. Um, yeah, that's a good. It's a good reflection moment for me to allow even more change to happen and to not scribble back to the person I was, because then I want to relate to sort of what happened this year with me. We're in November now, even though the sun is shining. God bless. Um, but I was in art school with you, and then I got a job as part of a writing team in Rotterdam, and my art school is in the other side of the country. Um, and I really wanted to explore all of it and excel at all of it, because that's the picture I wanted to create for myself. That's who I thought I should be, wanted to be, who I was, who I am. Um, but as I continued down that trail, it really drained me, and it really was just a lot, because moving from 4 cities every week on a consistent basis is just too much for a human being. Um, so too much change maybe while trying to be stable and all of that. It was just not a nice cocktail. Mm-mm. Those flavors did not go well together. Um, and by the end, I was just so confused by all of it, because I was like, this is what I thought I wanted. This is what I wanted. I have everything that I wanted, and I can't handle it. And it was like a whole discrepancy in the person I thought I was, and then what I actually started to desire. And then I also realized that li- that that desires can be way simpler, and that sort of this chase of career and of um, money, I guess, also as well, um, isn't what life really is about. It's about experiences, and actively being a part of those experiences, and sharing those experiences, and showing up as a full being rather than sort of this rabbit in the wheel of the structure we have created. Yeah, so I actually allowed myself to change, um, because I had a burnout. And so I had to let go of everything that I thought I was or thought I wanted, because it wasn't serving me or fulfilling me. And I realized that that journey is inwards, not outwards, even though I was already on the spiritual path. It's just lessons as you go, right? Um, yeah. How do you relate to everything I just said?
Well, you said a lot, I think,
Yeah.
and I think it's really interesting to hear it like this, because when I was earlier talking to you, you were also talking about like this back and forth of change, right? Like in one moment you will want the first thing, next moment you will want the next thing, and sometimes you will go back to the first, and then we'll back to the second, and then back to the third, and going on and on and on, in this sort of like yeah, pendulum kind of motion. And I think that's actually also a very important part of change.
Wait, I just want to relate. We were talking about the swing of bliss. It's a Buddhistic philosophy.
Yes, yes. And I think that's also very important, in an important part of change, because you you cannot change in one go. It has to happen over time. Like you cannot let go of something in one go, or something is not fixed in one go. It has to happen over time, and I think that's also what change is about. That you don't wake up one day and completely want something else, even though you might, and you might have changed, but that then is not something that happened at that date. It's something that happened before, in a long time before. So I think even though change is, you're ever changing, everything is ever changing. I think there's still a lot of grounding you can do in that change, because it is such a circular motion, or such a motion that keeps coming back. Um, do you have something to say about that?
I think it's really interesting. Um, just to note the fact that you're talking about gradual change, because um, wanting to do everything in one go was also something we just talked about before we came on this recording spot. Um, yeah, I wanted to note of like, okay, so I might not be very different from who I was yesterday, because that's is a short window, or who I was from an hour ago. Time is a lucrative concept anyway. But um, if you wake up one day, or you just stand still for a moment and you sort of trace it back to a longer period of time, so say 2 years, say 10 years, then you see that you've come a really long way, that there's been a lot of changes. And that's actually magical when you observe that, right? Um, and I think to some of us, we might relate to that in a very negative way, as in, like, maybe your life has steered into a direction that you're not very happy about. So, let's say, for instance, we had a really happy childhood, and then we're like 34 and we're just in this job and we're wearing a gray suit and we're drinking coffee every day. And when's the last time I really went outside and like, just noticed the fresh air, you know? And then you're like, whoa, what happened to that innocence? But it could also be, for me, let's make it personal, that when I observe myself in my teen years, I was very chaotic. I was very angry. I was very displaced in my emotional experience. And I think actually that's very much the story of the teenager, but still. And I was, I think, just lost, really lost. And so I just kind of went into sort of these escapism routes, because I'm a very curious being. And so, like, when I was a kid and I would see someone drink alcohol in the movies, it'd be like, what's happening? So when the opportunity was presented to me at a very young age, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try and figure this one out, you know. And then before you know it, because certain things just limit your, or loosen your, how do I say this, your inhibitions, it becomes a really fun experience. But I was very aggressive, and I was very angry at the world, and a lot of times very depressed, I think. And I used to smoke a whole lot of weed. um, and then when I look back now, I'm 24 now, and I think that that behavior started to take its change around 1920. I'm like, wow, I've come a really long way. I am no longer entertaining places that make me feel bad about myself. And it will be a constant lesson. Yeah, so, like, I was sitting on the couch with someone like 2 weeks ago, and she's a teacher, and she was talking about her job, how she is now, like, working with, like, people from 16 to 18 to 19. And I was like, I respect what you do, because those people are horrible at that age. And I was like, I was one of those people. I was really horrible to my teachers, really, really bad. And then she said to me, but you come across as a really soft and gentle person. I'm like, yeah, because I found the light of love. Because retrospectively, I fell in love with someone, and they really opened me up. And then I realized, okay, this way of reacting to everything around me is not conducive to making safe spaces in my relationship. And that's just been a tumbling weed, where now it's like, I'm related to everything around me. So everything I want to experience is what I give out, because it's inherently me. So it reflects the relationship I have to myself, which is not something I realized when I was 14. So that's big change, but in gradual time, because little things happen, and maybe even insignificant things. To bring it back to Amélie, like, they're talking about really quote unquote insignificant things, but they still decide to put it in the movie because somehow it has relation to everything. I don't know, but that's it's really big. If you wanna add to this, we can, but I actually have another question beaming. But if you wanna add, we can make space for that. You sure? Okay. I want to dive a little deeper into your art practice because we explored it a little bit because um, you were talking about the stones, and yesterday we were also talking about how you kind of want to keep going at this pace of how to care for things that don't really get a lot of recognition. Um, but yeah, just dive in deep into your art practice. Where did it come from? Where is it going to go? How does it make you feel? What is it all about? All of that stuff.
Okay, that's a big question again. So, I guess when we're talking about change, anyways, my art practice has changed a lot these last few months, actually, because art used to be for me a lot about expressing a lot of negative emotions that I didn't know where to otherwise place. So a lot of my art would be very dark and very yeah, depressing, or it always is in black and white, and it was always very heavy art. So a few months ago, I decided that I did not want to do that anymore. So I have completely turned around my art practice, and now I am actually doing the opposite of that. I'm still making a lot of heavy work because I think heaviness in itself is not a bad thing. I think it's actually very beautiful. But I am now more focusing on more the way of the way that I feel I love everything around me, because I also think that that's very it's just something I want to communicate to other people as well, which is also what art is about. And I feel like I finally found a way to not be personally offended when someone thinks something about my work, which also really helped me. So I'm less working on what an art piece might say about me, but I'm more working on what art is saying in itself. So I think I'm very happy that that's a development that is happening. Also, I'm working with color now, and a lot of softness, and softness in color, even though I still really like working with black and white. So, um, but I think it's starting to be more balanced. So, yeah, my art practice, yeah, it has been about, and it's really about this relationality I'm also talking to you about now, and about caring for all these little things and giving them uh, a stage, or a more important place in someone's life, someone that might observe my art. So yes, and I also like words. I think words are very pretty, and I think time is very pretty as well. So that's also two very important things that I work with a lot. But I think the project about the stones that I explained earlier is a really good example of how I'm trying to look at everything in the world, and how I'm therefore also trying to, um, yeah, to take all these things into my art practice. I hope that that's the answer.
Would you like to elaborate on the shift that happened between working from such heaviness and working with a specific color tone of black and white, which some people would argue are not color tones, but I acknowledge them, um, into more color? Like that shift, where did it come from? Where did it go? Where did it come from? Cotton Eye Joe.
I am not completely sure. Oh, I just broke my refrigerator. No,
It's the
radiator.
Oh, radiator,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So I think it mostly came from realizing that I had used this black and white for so long, and I just wanted I needed a change in my in me as a person. I felt like, okay, I have to leave behind the little part of me, and I have to change something. So colors was the most easiest thing to change at that moment, because it was something that you use. It's a tool. It's something that isn't inherently my personality, which is a very abstract thing. So I cannot change that. So therefore, this use of colors was like my tool to like enact mental breakdown. And it worked. I did have a mental breakdown. I got completely crazy. I wore colored clothing for like 3 weeks, and it made me realize how much the color was affecting me, and it made me realize why I always wear black, because black actually makes me feel very, very calm, because it's like absence of color, and that makes me very yeah, centered in my brain. So I have realized I do not have to wear color, because that's not an act of caring anymore to wear color. So that's, yeah, some developments I thought were interesting, and also were a big part of yeah, first going completely all out with only using color, and now crawling back a little bit, because I have realized why I did not use color before. So that's something I've changed. Yeah, I think using these like little tools to enact your brain, or to make your brain do something, or like freak out a little, I think it's very, very important to do that, to keep experiencing new things. And I was wondering, do you also feel like that? Do you also do that sometimes? And what do you do?
Mm. Good question, but I want to hone in a little bit more on what you said. But I will come back to it, and if I don't, please bring me back to it. Yeah, what you were saying about make your brain do things. It's sort of like an eruption of the status quo. It's a disruption of this certain wave that is coming in the same pattern over and over and over again. And so the addressing for the need for change, sort of, which is it's coming back. The conversation keeps coming back about change. Um, yeah, and also to talk about the color black, or the experience of black and the experience of color, because I think I've said this to you before, but I relate to sort of that change that happened at some point in my art practice, because I was working a lot with black, white, and red, and those were sort of the colors that were just in there. It was also the time where I was like listening to metal music and rock and roll music, so maybe there is a strong correlation there, but that's not for this time to figure out. Um, and what I wanted to say about that is that eventually I sort of woke up to this. Uh, for me, I would describe it as waking up to life and waking up to color as I began to relate to the life around me in a more vibrant way. So not placing myself outside of it or underneath it, because that's how I used to do it, but placing myself right in the middle of it. I'm a big fan of the chakra meditation theory. I call it the chakra theory, but whatever. And it's full of color. And I started actively working with color in relationship to the chakras and waking up my chakras. So I work with green because I want to enact the heart space, because it vibrates on the same frequency, because color is a frequency, and so is our being. And so that was it for me. And it's interesting to note that it literally shook you so much, because it was like maybe too much life happening at the same time all at once, sort of like, oh damn. Because in black it's a void, and it's not this negative thing, as in, well, there's positive and negative, but more like as in it's a bad thing, because that's just a concept in our mind. But it's this space where creation can be developed, and sort of where identity shifts or fades away, been looking into darkness retreats or learning about them a little bit, and the conversations that stir this is like it's really interesting, because they all say sort of your identity just fades away and you come into this really blank state of being, but also at the same time it's also where imagination is created, and sort of the concept of black and white, yin and yang, there's a balance, the swing of bliss, you know, like we are really happy, then we're really sad, we're really happy, and then we're really sad, but in the middle there's just bliss for all that is. And I have a very big yin and yang tattoo on my arm, and I've always loved this idea, and it was actually yesterday that I learned that you don't want to be circling around it, you want to be in the middle line of those things, where you're sort of in one hand in this side and one hand in the other side. Yeah, and so maybe black is also this really comfortable space for you, because it's this space where identity doesn't have to be so vibrant or so active, and you can just sort of be in a really infinite space of just endless creation, but never observing it beyond your own mind, maybe. And it also reminds me of a vision I had. To come back to the heat, or the sweat hut, actually, in one of the rounds, we did 4 rounds for each wind direction. And in one of them, she was guiding us to meet an ancestor or meet a guide or whatever. And my experience went so fast. And basically, the long story is not worth noting, but I changed into an eagle. And then I flew into the space, because we were on a rock and we flew into space. And then it was just dark. And then I was like, okay, that's just it, you know, because I was like, first I was like, what's going to happen? And then we were just there. And I had to learn to accept that dark space. And the moment I did that, it was really fast though, a white portal opened, and I flew right into the white portal, and then there was creation there. And it was very non-vivid, but I knew exactly what was happening. And it's sort of this acceptance of nothing before you can accept everything. And in the middle, there's the whole color spectrum. Yeah. Long story short. Yeah, no, that is the long story. What was your question? Because now I'm ready to answer. Unless you want to relay on this. Do you want to say something on this?
Not necessarily. Only about the color black, because I have a lot of affinity for this really color, because I agree with you about it being a safe space to like not have to be so vibrant. And I think it also is about sometimes being very sensitive to colors, or in my experience, colors also have like a very big impact on me. And I feel like when I have too many colors around, it's constantly working on my brain, and it makes me really anxious and very tired as well. So I think that's also noteworthy to have that side of it as well. But my question was, what are like these? How do you change your way of thinking? How have you radically made yourself have a breakdown, and how did it go? Because I'm very interested to know.
So basically, how do I actively enact change? Because I think that's kind of what we're getting at. For me, reading a book, really, book in its whole entire concept. Books have really shifted a lot for me. Always have, always will. I think I love them. They're so great because they open up conversations where you might not find them, what like you have access to a type of knowledge, to a type of information that maybe is not so vibrant in your reality, but is deeply valuable to your personal development. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it so much because you can call a therapist, you can invite a therapist, but you can read 3 self-help books as well, and the relationship will be different because human interaction is so powerful. But maybe you need to take those steps first before you realize, because a book might cost you 10 to 30 euros. Having a therapist will cost you a lot more. I think both are very valuable experiences. But like, for instance, the book I was relating to in the beginning, The Healing Wisdom of Africa, I had no one in my life who was ever going to teach me something like that, right? But it enlightened me so much, and I'm so grateful for the writer reading or writing that book. And I would love to actually host him on this podcast sometime. That would be really interesting to talk to some of my favorite writers. Another book that I think preaching to the choir. You've heard me talk about this so many times. Do you already know which book I'm gonna say? Yes, Braided Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer deeply affected me. It poured my heart right open. I cried at pretty much every chapter that I read. It was so beautiful. It was a narrative that I deeply needed to experience to soften into my life even more. To talk a little bit about why this book was so profound for me is Robin Wall Kimmerer is from Native American descent, and next to that, she is an ecologist and an amazing writer. And so every chapter is an analogy, or not an analogy. Oh my god, I lost the word. Basically, a little experience of her life. There's a word for this. I know this word. It's okay. We'll get there. And in that chapter, she then anecdote. It's an anecdote of her life, and in every chapter there's a tiny part, and she weaves her personal experience along with her ecological wisdom and then her Native American wisdom, and it becomes so beautiful. And one of the things that she really deeply addresses is the animacy of life and certain traditions and the loss of them, and so many things. So I deeply recommend this book. It's like 12 euros on Amazon. It's not expensive at all, and it will profoundly change me. So I know that the book I am going to read is going to change me, because I really love stories, and I used to read a lot of like classical literature, but it's not as effective as reading folklore written specifically by people of color, people outside of the Western diaspora, because it's the narrative. That's the narrative I'm looking for, because I am very much aware of the Western narrative, and it's not what I need to learn about, and that will not change me because I am already, you know. Yeah, so I think the answer is books. That's the deepest change, and then there are other things as well, but I think books. Yeah, and they've always influenced my art practice from beginning to end. Always have, always will. So if anyone has good book recommendations, please post them. Yeah. I feel quite fulfilled by the conversation. It's interesting that you note this back to me, because now I'm like sort of actively thinking of myself rather than focusing my attention on you. But we're just extensions of each other, so that's actually very normal. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to this conversation?
Is no an answer?
Yes. Yes, no is an answer.
Yeah. No, I think you said a lot of things that actually it makes a nice story. Yeah.
All right. Then thank you for your time. Thank you for your space, for allowing me in your house. We're filming in your house. Thank you for existing. Thank you for creating. Thank you for allowing yourself to change. I really love that part of this conversation, the gradual change story. Um, yeah. Is there anything else you want to add about who you are, where we can find you, what the next step is in your life, all of that stuff?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for being brave enough to start a podcast and just do it. And I'm also very proud of you for starting making music and singing because I think it's very important in your life. And I'm very happy for you that you can do that. And I also think that you are a wonderful person. And yes, and I'm very very happy to that you came here and that you are always so thoughtful, and that's why I think you will make a great podcaster. Yes. So yeah, you asked where people can find me. I have an Instagram account. It's called Nick Esmeyer, NIKESMEYEIJER. There you can follow me. I also have a daily account with 12 followers, where it's still going, where I post every day some weird ass picture that doesn't make any sense, with a quote I heard or with a poem or whatever. So if you want to have a daily refresher and the happy weird ass picture that you don't have any relation to, please follow me on there too. You can find it on my other Instagram page. I think that's where you can find me easiest. Yes, and otherwise just ask Marianne. I love meeting new people, so if you want to be my friend, you can always ask. Okay, I think that's yeah.
The really intriguing Instagram account about where you post every day is called All Boats Should Be Yellow, and actually it's freaking amazing. The algorithm does not always show me, but I love this account very much. Yeah, thank you again. I feel like we need to make some weird ass sound to really close this off. So do you just want to go into like making a weird ass vocal sound? Okay, get ready, people. This is the end. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. See you next time.